and welcome to Centered with Abby. My name is Abby, and I'm a licensed professional counselor, a yoga instructor, a writer, an embodied arts facilitator. And if you're new to the podcast, I'm trying to build a community of people who want to go from life on autopilot to a life where they feel fully alive. On alternate weeks, I lead guided practices like last week's mini retreat and audio essays like today's episode. This essay comes from my Substack, which also happens to be the online hub of Centered with Abby. So if you're not already subscribed, I invite you to consider joining our community. If you're not listening to this on Substack, the link will be in the show notes below. So if you missed the previous episodes, our theme for this month has been living deeply. What does it mean to live a deep, meaningful, and intentional life? Today's essay builds on that theme. Now on to the essay. I originally envisioned my project on living deeply to be the premise of a book. In fact, I have a Google Doc from 2019 with pages of bullet-pointed ideas for the, quote, Live Deeply Project book. So clearly this is something that's been rattling around my brain for a long time. I dreamed of writing the next Eat, Pray, Love. I longed to go on a transformational journey, create a new reality for myself, and help others do the same. Perhaps someday there will be a book. I haven't totally given up on that yet. But here's what I've realized since 2019. Dreaming too big is one of the sneakiest ways that I self-sabotage my goal of living deeply. That might sound counterintuitive to anyone who knows me, since I have always been a head-in-the-clouds dreamer, and I regularly advocate for people to follow their passions. I don't believe there's anything inherently wrong with dreaming big and shooting for the stars. The world needs big dreamers. My problem is that my dreams and logistical realities often feel too far apart to coexist. My dreams are rarely small. When I dedicate myself to something, my mind tends to immediately jump from 0 to 100. As a beginning songwriter, I was plotting record deals and world tours before I had even played a local open mic night. As an 8-year-old on a swim team, my goal wasn't just to be the best at the local meets. It was to go to the Olympics someday. And my goal as an early 20-something for a Live Deeply project book was not just to finish writing a book, which in and of itself is a gigantic feat, and it wasn't even to have it published. I wanted to write something that changed lives, something that people would still be reading 100 years from now. Now that might sound crazy or grandiose, and I am fully aware of that fact. But for as long as I can remember, I've had this internal drive pushing me to aspire for bigger and bigger things. And it doesn't come from any sense of superiority. I'm really not trying to prove that I'm better than anyone else or more capable or that I deserve more than the next person. It comes from an inner fire, an innate tendency to push myself to the max just to see how far I can go. If I'm going to do something, I want to do it all the way. And I have this fear of dying without leaving my mark on the world. Though this comes from an authentic place, it has not always served me well. By my mid to late 20s, I had already experienced multiple rounds of burnout, had multiple existential crises about my career choices, and had accumulated a graveyard of plans and ideas. My abandoned dreams tend to follow a predictable pattern. Initially, my soul ignites with possibilities. I feel jazzed and elated, and I spend hours swirling ideas around in my mind like a fine wine, picturing how amazing it'll be when they come to fruition. With energy and enthusiasm, I get to work. I obsessively pour my heart, mind, and soul into the project for months, usually. I work in the evenings and weekends and whenever I have a spare moment. I think about it in the shower and as I'm falling asleep at night. And then inevitably, something drags me back to reality. The frenzy of excitement fades and the self-doubt kicks in. That shiny dream loses some of its polish, and the fine wine goes flat. It's like standing at a lookout point on a hike and seeing a landmark in the distance and thinking, that's not that far away. I can totally make it that far. But then you hike for another hour and come to another lookout point, and you realize that the landmark doesn't actually look that much closer than it did an hour ago. If anything, it looks farther away. Your stomach drops. You have the sinking understanding that the proximity was a mirage. You'd have to hike another 10 or 20 miles to get to that landmark, and you're running out of daylight. Eventually, the voice of practicality drowns out the voice of possibility, and you give up. You turn around and start the trek back to the trailhead, convincing yourself that that landmark probably wasn't that cool anyway. My 20s have been filled with unfinished hikes. Projects started, internal fires stoked, thousands of hours spent pondering, creating, strategizing, only to realize that it would take me years to reach the landmark, if I ever make it there at all. So rather than scale back and reevaluate, I have a habit of hopping on a new trail. I promise I'm not lazy. I work extremely diligently if I believe in something, and I don't tend to give up because something gets hard. I tend to bail when I worry that I might be failing. Once that fear of failing creeps in, I'm easily seduced by new dreams. Like a gambler hovering by the slot machines, I have convinced myself that the next lever I pull has to be the one to pay off. The next dream is always sexier than the current reality. Of course, the sensible response to my self-defeating pattern would be to find a series of smaller, more realistic goals. Rather than trying to be the next Joni Mitchell right away, start frequenting some open mics, book some local gigs, do something, and see how it feels. That's the advice I would give to any of my therapy clients in a similar predicament. But to reinforce the cliche of helping professionals who don't actually practice what they preach, that is not what I've always done. Often the smaller goals feel disappointing. They're not quite good enough. They lack the sparkle and excitement of the big goal, and on some level, lowering the bar makes me feel like I've already failed. So, I become intoxicated with the new idea, convince myself that this one makes sense, and I focus my energy there for a while. And then eventually I give up when I realize how far away I am from the finish line, and the cycle continues. I now have 2 albums worth of unrecorded songs, 4 partially written books, several half-created online courses, numerous discarded business plans, and at least 20 dreams that I haven't even started working toward. So what does this have to do with living deeply? A lot, as it turns out. In my observation, many people have their own versions of this self-defeating pattern. And I believe it's one of the common traps that prevents us from feeling a deep sense of satisfaction with our lives. Humans long for completion. We derive a feeling of purpose from finished tasks. In past eras, or at least in my idealized visions of them, the tasks were often simpler. Catch a fish, gather berries, start a fire. In today's landscape, it can feel like our work is never done. We could always be doing more. Or at the very least, we could always be doing something else. I think of it as the Tinderification of the world. When we start to become dissatisfied with the thing in front of us, we can always just swipe left and jump to the next thing. We're inflicted with an illusion of infinite possibilities. The perpetual allure of greener grass keeps us running in circles and never actually getting where we want to go. The problem is that our brain chemistry and our deeper existential longing for purpose are often working against each other. You hear a lot about dopamine these days, that infamous neurotransmitter that fuels motivation. But something that a lot of people don't realize is that dopamine has more to do with anticipation than completion. It rewards the chase, the possibility of a reward, the allure of maybe this next thing will be the one. That's why starting a new dream feels intoxicating, while slogging through the middle can feel so draining. And of course, our phones, apps, and online platforms exploit this wiring. Unpredictable rewards, so sometimes you get something great, sometimes nothing, hook our motivation. It's one reason why our feeds are so addicting. Each swipe, scroll, or notification hits the dopamine button just enough to keep us chasing. But here's the paradox. Chasing gives us the thrill of movement without the deep joy of arriving. We end up addicted to beginnings, but we bail before we get to a satisfying end. We are always running and never getting anywhere. True satisfaction, the lasting kind, the kind that gives our lives a sense of meaning, usually comes not from the dopamine high, but from the quieter, slower chemistry of completion and consistency, serotonin, endorphins, and the profound joy of knowing that we've worked hard and finished something. Unfortunately, avoiding the dopamine trap can feel like swimming upstream. Our brain chemistry already sets us up to chase novelty. But then, often, some unhelpful thought patterns double down, convincing us to quit when things don't feel perfect. Together, biology and psychology create a cycle that keep us stuck. Now, this is the quick and dirty version of some very complex systems, but the broad pattern holds. Novelty amps the chase, and perfectionistic thinking nudges us to quit before we get to the end. Now, I know that not everyone has dreams of global domination in their field, but many people fall into their own versions of these traps on a more day-to-day basis. For instance, have you ever set a New Year's resolution or tried to start a new habit or a lifestyle change only to give up after a few weeks or a month? Maybe you tell yourself that you'd like to go to the gym 5 days a week. And maybe you're really dedicated for a bit. But then life happens and you miss a few sessions. Suddenly it's been a month and you realize you haven't been to the gym at all. You feel a smoldering sense of shame, which you suppress by telling yourself you're not really a gym person after all. Why do we do that? To put on my therapist hat for a moment, this common pattern often partially stems from a type of cognitive distortion or error in thinking that we call all-or-nothing thinking. In all-or-nothing thinking, which is also sometimes called black and white thinking, we only see the extremes. Something is either amazing or terrible, young or old, a success or a failure. The nuance, the middle, the gray all get painted over and cease to exist. We present ourselves with two options, and we must choose which of the two boxes we're going to contort ourselves to fit into. Unfortunately, black and white thinking is rampant in our society. It's probably always been a threat to human happiness, but I believe that social media is really magnifying the problem. Algorithms love all-or-nothing content, so it spreads through the population like a contagious disease, infecting our thinking on and offline. We're especially prone to all-or-nothing thinking when our nervous system is dysregulated, an unfortunately common occurrence in our always-on society. So many of us have unwittingly become indoctrinated into the cult of all or nothing. In my case, the options that I presented myself with were 1, to do something all the way, so become an Olympic swimmer or best-selling author or world-renowned songwriter. Or 2, to not do it at all, so hop to a new passion. Essentially, my subconscious mind decided that I can either be world-class at something or I'm a failure who should just give up and not even try. The middle, being average or even slightly above average, doesn't count. The thing is, there are almost always more than two options. You can almost always find gray or even plaid or polka dot amidst the black and white. And joy, contentment, and purpose are rarely black or white. To live deeply, we must get comfortable with the messy middle. We must learn to love the gray and favor progress over perfection. We need to spot these traps, or at least notice when we're in them, so we can crawl out. We must slow down, step away from our screens sometimes, recenter, self-reflect, and hold ourselves with compassion when we're not perfect, because we won't be. And if this feels hopeless, like you'll never outsmart your dopamine system, here's a little counterintuitive fact that might help. Dopamine doesn't only fire during the chase. It also fires when a finish is better than expected. That surprise signal is how the brain learns, and it's our opening to rewire what feels rewarding. Now, we can't control every outcome, but we can shape how we register it. Most of us are prone to blowing past small wins, sprinting to the next possibility, and teaching our brain that small wins don't count. What if instead we slowed down and savored each win, like stretching out the last few bites of a ridiculously good dessert? What if we let ourselves soak up the reward of a small, incremental change? Pause. Name the win. Let yourself feel proud. Take 10 seconds to notice the "that counted" feeling. Small finishes, savored well, start to rewire what feels rewarding. Living deeply isn't just about finishing the hike. It's about celebrating the milestones along the way. Thank you for listening. And if you're curious about how to actually implement some of these ideas, my paid subscribers on Substack will be getting some bonus content to help you go from idea to action. I'm really all about practicality, so I like thinking deep thoughts and pie-in-the-sky ideas, but I also really want to help people actually implement things. So again, I invite you to consider becoming a paid subscriber. Every subscription helps me be able to actually afford to pour into this project and this community, and I really try to make it worth your while. Thank you so much for joining, and I hope to see you next week.